Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to ROIDS, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
Hey bro, welcome back to the Steroids Podcast. I want to talk to you about something really important quickly before we get into the questions. And that is that if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to pause the podcast now, go to steroidspodcast.com, www.steroidspodcast.com, and sign up for the pop-up VIP email list so that I have your email and I can reach you in case of internet censorship. So we all know that the type of stuff that I'm talking about, there's a lot of powers that be that don't want this kind of information being said and want this kind of information to be silenced. So, for example, I've had my YouTube channel with around 20,000 subscribers on it deleted in the past. And that was with no warning, okay? They just came and deleted it, okay? So those 20,000 people or 15,000 people, it was somewhere in that range that I was, contacting and were able to get the information, not able to get the information anymore. So for you guys, if you like the podcast and you're listening to it, make sure to go to steroidspodcast.com. That's the website for this podcast. Right now, pause the episode and go do that. And sign up. There's a pop-up that will come up after you're on the site for like 20 seconds or 15 seconds or something. And it'll say the VIP list, the Steroids Podcast VIP email list. Sign up for that so I have your email. So if my shit ever gets censored, I can still contact you and tell you, hey, here's a new episode that come out or something like that, right? Because that's a big part of like using the internet. I got to have a way, like, here's me making this stuff, and I got to have a way that I can feel like, okay, I can communicate with you now. So there's you on the other side of this. I'm on this end, and imagine that we're doing one of those things where you got the cup and you get you cut a hole in the bottom of the cup and you put a string through the cup, and then, you throw that over to your friend's house, the other end of the string, and your friend, he pulls it in his window, and, he cuts out at the bottom of a cup and puts the string into his cup. And so then you both are holding a cup with a string between your houses. And if you talk into that cup, the freaking string communicates what you're saying, the sound, through the freaking string to the cup in the other guy's house. And so you listen in with the cup and speak to the cup like a freaking telephone. And that string, like even a cloth string, will pick up the freaking sound, okay? So that's what I'm doing with you right now, because I got this microphone right here and I'm speaking into the microphone. We've got to have this set up, man. That's why I had to go over that. You got to go do the VIP email list, all right? Getting on with the questions. I've been meaning to get to that for like the last 10 episodes, man. I had a lot. I keep on wanting to talk about that thing with the email list, and I keep on forgetting about it. And so, man, I had a lot of pent up, thoughts and emotions about it. Because, that whole internet censorship thing is really against me. So, but I really like the internet. Like I said, I like that cool thing. The reason why I was talking about the string and everything is because I'm talking into this device, and then you're like on the other side of the string, with your device, your computer or your Apple iPhone or Samsung or whatever you're listening with. and so it's like we're talking like on that, just like the kid in the string, talking to the friend, you know, when they're at the different house, like with the telephone. That's like what we're doing right here, but I got to be able to reach you. So that's why I was talking about that. So that's why we got to get that done. So getting on with the questions. All right, the first one is how to prevent a muscle tear. Now, I've never torn a muscle. And, you know, having experience with tearing a muscle would probably help you know more. So I would talk to some people that tore muscles as well. But for me, one of the reasons why I have never torn a muscle is because when I lift weights, I make sure that I'm in control of the weight the entire time that I'm lifting, okay? So, you know, this is really common to see when people bench press, is the bar, if I was going to talk about the speed of the bar when they bench press, you know, so say they've got it held up, they just unrack the bar, and they go like down, up, down, up. So it's like the part where it goes downwards towards their chest is like pretty damn fast. And then it's like slowly going back up towards the top position again with the triceps extended. So that is not how to lift weights, you guys. That is the opposite way of lifting weights. Like when I see this, I'm like, oh man, like you got to change. You got to change, dude. Cause so I don't want to hurt anybody's egos. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you're doing this thing where you're going like down, up, like slowly like that, you got it. You just got it. Next time, you just got to decide, hey, I'm just going to do it differently from now on. You know, even though I have to use less weight, you just got to freaking change doing that, man. Cause it's no good. It's no good. It's not helping you at all. So that eccentric part of the movement, that's where, you know, the stretching part of the movement, that's where you like get your muscle growth from and like the muscle stimulation. So if you're going through that part and like kind of dropping it down to your chest and then pushing it up slowly, you're like taking out the part where you really stimulate the muscle fibers and get them to like grow back bigger and stronger and take up the nutrition from your food. It's like, it's just like the worst. Every time you want to push it up so that you can do another stretch under control again. Because that's the part that actually does what you're in the gym. That's the most important part, right? The other part works a bit, but it's like a ratio of like 2/3 to 1/3, right? That part where you push it back up, that's like 1/3 of where the stimulus is, or maybe a little less, you know? That stretching part, boom. That shit where you stretch it and you let it, this chest stretch, putting it down to your chest, and then you can hold it there and you can comfortably hold it at your chest. Pause for 1 second, like literally 1 second, just like 1/1000, and then boom, up. So the cadence is like stretching, pause on the chest, boom, up. Stretching, pause on the chest, boom, up. That is like the cadence of how you should be doing the bench press. And so you'll be accelerating the weight up when you're pushing up, okay? And when you do that, that's going to be making you do a maximal effort on each rep. So, you know, on the last rep, you might grunt a little bit, you know, on a normal set and be like, ugh, to get that last rep. Okay, well, on this one, you're going to be grunting on the first rep, like, ugh, because you got to push that shit away from you as fast as possible. You got to be, because, you know, why would you be pushing it slower, okay? Then you're not moving your muscle, you're not taking it to the maximum intensity. If your muscle can move the weight quickly upwards, then you need to be able to take advantage of what your muscle can do to the max, not conserving it so you can do more reps later in the set. No, it's a high intensity exercise. That's what growing muscle is increasing your maximal ability. So you got to exercise maximally. So you come down stretching it. And then the fast part of the movement is when you press it back up. When you press the bench press back up and your arms are extended with the bar away from you, that's the part where the bar is moving fast. And then the part where it's coming down towards you is where it's moving slow. Okay, and so I think now you understand what kind of control that you should have of the weight when you're weightlifting, okay? And when you do control weights like this, joint injuries can still happen, where you can, have some joint issues or something, but muscle tears, tendon tears, Very unlikely, okay? Very unlikely. Because you were in control of the weight and you could stop it at any time in its movement if you wanted to. If you probably, you're not stopping it all the time and shit, but if you wanted to, you could at any time during the movement. Okay? So that's the big thing for muscle tears. And then the other thing to know with muscle tears is that they don't occur, or muscle tears like tendon tears, when sometimes the muscle tears like the actual fiber, and then other times the tendon tears off of the bone, the tendon that, attaches the muscle to the bone so the muscle can pull and like move your arm or whatever. And when I'm talking about bench press with the rep cadence and everything, that was just an example for every exercise. Every exercise, the stretch and then the flex. The stretching part should always be slow on every single exercise, completely under control. Stretching, you could stop the weight at any time if you wanted to. And then the part where you flex again and make the muscle shorter, that part should always be fast as possible. So, obviously by the first rep of the set is going to move faster than the last rep of the set because, you're going to be too fatigued at the end to move it fast anymore. You get it? And then every single time when you come down for that negative, you never drop the weight down. You always control it at the speed that you could stop it if you wanted to, okay? That does the most muscle growth stimulus, and it prevents the tear because tears only occur on the stretching portion of the movement. They do not occur on the flexing part of the movement, okay? So you just need to know that whole thing where, that's why I was saying when I first started talking about this, like if you are one of these guys that does the bench press right now, where you go fast down to your chest and then slow pressing up, fast down to your chest, slow pressing up, you just got to stop. Like, you just got to give that up, like right now, because it's not worth it. Those guys are the ones that, that's the part of the movement where muscles tear. It's also the same thing like NFL football players, American football players, they tear their pecs quite frequently while they're playing the game. And the reason for that is because if you're like blocking someone or somebody presses on your arm, or you make a tackle where somebody presses backwards on your arm, it's because all of a sudden the arm is getting stretched backwards really quickly, right? And that's that stretching motion and the quickness of how fast the muscle is being stretched. Those are the two factors that cause like pec tears, for example. But it's for any muscle in your body. It's always on the stretching portion. And so that's always where the tear happens, during the stretching portion of the movement, not during the flexing portion. And then the other thing is that the speed impacts how much it's going to be, how much force is required to make a tear. That's the end of how I say to prevent a muscle tear. All right. Next question is from Velvety Adventures. Bro, can you please talk about premature ejaculation and a cure? Most anabolic user community platforms never talk about this. It's too tough to get a solution for this. Yeah, so, steroids definitely affect everything to do with your reproductive system. They even they shut off your hormone system taking steroids, and then they take over for you. Basically, they shut off your reproductive system. Make it so that your body doesn't produce any more sperm or testosterone or anything like that. And then, hopefully you're taking the right combination of steroids to, fill in for that and have your, at least some portion of your sexual system come back on. And usually taking testosterone is what does that. But sometimes, on just testosterone only, guys' libidos come down after a while, and then they find out they got to start taking HCG, and HCG brings their libido back up to where it should be. But, pretty much all factors of this process, that reproductive shutdown and how steroids then can, how they impact the reproductive system. Pretty much all of them can be changed. They can be fiddled with. Okay. So as far as, lengthening the amount of time that you need in order to get that reflexive action where you start to ejaculate, shoot white stuff. That can be influenced by taking steroids. So generally, Proviron decreases the amount of time that that takes to happen. And then Masteron also decreases the amount of time that makes to happen, but also makes the interval between times shorter. So that would be Masteron and Proviron. They have pretty similar effects in that you will want to climax more often and be able to, and they also like make you come a little bit quicker. Okay, and then there are other ones like Trenbolone. Okay, and Trenbolone. Ask anybody who's used Trenbolone. You won't have premature ejaculation if you're using Trenbolone. Okay, so some people, if they've really had a lot of anxiety about that or something, or that's been something that's caused them a lot of grief during their life, they'll be like, whoa, this is the cure to my premature ejaculation, taking Trenbolone. Like, this is great. But, they'll think maybe Tren's good for their sex life or something. But I promise you, in the end, it won't be after you use it for longer. But, that's a real effect of Trenbolone, is that it does take away premature ejaculation. It basically, because it's a reflex, like the ejaculation is a reflex. So basically they make the amount of stimulation that has to happen to make that reflex happen way more, like the like mental and physical whole process, in order to make that reflex be triggered. So it basically like desensitizes whatever mechanism is in your brain that triggers that, ejaculation reflex. So then the stimulation has to be quite a bit more before that reflex gets stimulated. So it increases the time and pretty much allows you to like choose when that's going to happen. So yeah, but there are other ways other than Tren. There are other ways other than Tren. Not going to get into it this time because they're not steroid ways, but there are lots of things that you can do. So, yeah, getting on with the next question then. It's from Viral Body. If I'm 21, is a TRT dose of test for my first real cycle good, or should I step up the dose? I've used Ostarine and Rad 140 SARMS before. Okay, well, taking a TRT dose of test isn't a first cycle, so I think that you have like unrealistic expectations about what steroids can do for you. So a TRT dose of test is just replacing your natural testosterone levels, so you really shouldn't feel much different or notice much difference at all. If you wanted to like do a cycle, like you said, like a cycle of steroids, which doing TRT test is not. In order to see any gains, that we're doing a cycle that during a short period of time, you really need like 500 milligrams of testosterone as a minimum. And even that's not really very strong. Different people will have different results because different people create different blood levels of testosterone from the same milligram amount of injection. And it's quite a wide range where one guy can have double the amount of testosterone in his blood after the same injection amount than another guy. If they both injected the same amount of milligrams, it's different bodies metabolize or destroy, break down hormones at different speeds. So that's why there can be some variance in what people say about first cycle. Some guys can have a first cycle experience like 250 milligrams of testosterone. Occasionally, this is unusual, but there is some people out there where they respond like quite a bit on that, low dosage for that first cycle. So there's a bit of not clarity there, because usually the experience is that doesn't happen. But then there is this odd man out. Every once in a while, there's one of these guys where they do, have quite good benefits from something like 250 milligrams per week. But it's really rare, like one of 50 or less probably is like that. It's not something that the average guy experiences on his first cycle. So you've already used SARMS, dude. That's gonna be stronger like than TRT. Like SARMS, if you're the one you said was Rad 140, which I've never used that, but I've used Ostarine and I've also used LGD, and both of those are like steroids. They're like moderate. They're like on the weaker side of moderate steroids. Pretty much everybody that I've known who has used LGD 4033 before they did a testosterone cycle for their first cycle, everybody says the LGD was stronger. Basically, every single person says that it was stronger than 500 milligrams of testosterone per week. And then when I was on it, though, to me, it felt more like 300 milligrams. So I went off of testosterone, and I was on LGD and an S23. Yeah, because I was off of testosterone. And then when I was off of testosterone and I was on that, I could feel that I was on something, but my body started like kind of deteriorating a little bit, right? Because it was only on SARMs and no testosterone. And so then I added those testosterones back in, and then I was on 1,000 milligrams, 1,250 milligrams of testosterone a week with some LGD 4033. And then it was working good. So it was working, my cycle with the testosterone was working better with the LGD than not. Okay. And definitely, that there's no question about it. So they do work. However, they don't replace steroids. And I definitely noticed my body deteriorating a bit when I used them without steroids, SARMs. But with your experience, bro, the TRT dose of test for your first real cycle ain't going to make you feel shit. So, yeah, I'd step up the dose. You've used Ostarine and Rad 140. How about you start, if I were you, I would start out my first cycle with like testosterone and an oral steroid, or testosterone and Trenbolone. I know a lot of people say, what the hell? Dude, my first cycle, I did testosterone for the first month. And then after that, I said, fuck it, I'm using Tren. How many guys have said that? Fuck it. That's a meme. Fuck it, I'm using Tren. Fuck it, I'm using Tren. Next question is from Mo. Question for the podcast. What happens if you accidentally inject air intramuscularly? I have pharmaceutical grade testosterone, but sometimes I can't get all the bubbles out. Yeah, that's kind of a question, huh? When you're like not quite so used to injections. Yeah, you try to get all the air out. So what you do to do that is you face the syringe with the needle on it towards the ceiling, so up, and then you start like tapping the barrel of the syringe or flicking it where like the oil is, and that like makes the water or the oil, the steroid oil, then the air bubbles kind of like go through it up to the top. And then once the air bubbles are at the top from you like flicking the syringe or whatever, then you can like press them out, out at the tip of the needle or the tip of the syringe and get them out of there. But if you can't get all the air bubbles out and, there's still a little bit in there, like a 1/4 milliliter of air or something, personally, I don't worry about that. So definitely having a little bit of air bubbles in there, or like, a little bit of air in there or something, like a 1/4 milliliter or something, never had a problem with it. Never known anyone who's had a problem with it. Okay. So that's my answer to that. Is that an official medical answer? No, it's not. But, never known anyone who's had a problem with that. And there's also a difference between injecting air into a vein and into a muscle. Because if you inject a bit of air into a muscle, I guess that the concern is, having a bubble of it in your bloodstream and having that go through your heart or something, which, yeah, that could happen if you inject air into a vein, because then it goes right into your heart. And, that's not good. But if it's in your muscle and it's got to go through all this shit to get back to your heart, I don't think you got much to worry about. So I've never had a problem, never known anyone who's had a problem. All right, next question is from Zach. who asks, can people sense someone with elevated hormone levels, such as how humans pick up on pheromones? Does that have any correlation? I would say, yeah. I can definitely, like, people on steroids are just different than people who aren't on steroids. Like, just being around them, it's just a bit different. One thing that you notice is their eyes. So that's probably like the most prominent thing is people who take steroids, their eyes seem like way more intense all the time. So when you're talking to them, there can be, it just seems like they're a little bit tense or serious, or it has some kind of an effect where it can make you feel a little bit of stress actually when you're talking to people who are on, you know, a lot of steroids, or, you know, a lot of steroids for them, to where they're, because it like hypes you up. So I'm not sure exactly like what it is about the face and the eyes that change, but I'm sure it has to do with adrenaline, because like your adrenaline levels are always a little bit higher when you're on steroids. And, you know, obviously when somebody's like, you know, really pumped up and like has a lot of adrenaline, like obviously they just seem a bit more intense and, you know, pumped up a bit. You know, even if they're not a muscular person, it just having that's really what it looks like actually. A higher adrenaline level, like a higher resting adrenaline level. That's the thing with the eyes. I think I figured this out while I was talking just now about how to explain it to you. And the thing with the eyes is, yeah, it's a higher adrenaline level. Their resting adrenaline level is higher. And this is pretty common with steroid users. And you can see it and you can feel it, because that feeling, it transmits to you. And you think, oh, it could make you feel a little bit tense, something like that. Like, because they seem like they're hyped up. They're wired. Slightly wired. And if you take the right steroids too, they can seriously wire you. Like if you take really high dosages of testosterone, up to like 2 grams per week or so, or if you take a ton of Proviron or like a ton of Androl and Winstrol, I'm talking like, you know, like at least 100 milligrams a day of multiple of those at the same time. So, and then like a ton of testosterone too, like, you know, maybe you're taking 1.5 grams of testosterone, and then you're taking 100 milligrams of Proviron per day, and 100 milligrams of Anadrol and 100 milligrams of Winstrol per day along with that, you know? Like, dude, you will be like seriously hyped. Yeah, like you will feel like the steroids are, I mean, you will be shaking. You will see a tremor in your body. Like when you walk downstairs, you'll get a bit of a tremor, like in your knee. You'll feel it as you kind of lower yourself down. Or like when you look at your hands, or even like people like your girlfriend or your family or something, or people just in general, if they see you reach out to grab like a fork or grab something, like when you're eating together with other people, you know, and they see your arms stretched out, they might say something like, oh, you're shaking a little bit, or like, why are you shaking a little bit? What's wrong? Or something like that. Because it causes, you know, when you have adrenaline, it causes this little like tremor. And yeah, taking like those steroids, especially testosterone, especially Trenbolone, especially Anadrol, especially Dianabol. I mean, Dianabol, if you take 100 milligrams and just bomb it, you visibly like start getting like kind of red and feeling a swelling feeling in your face, and feeling irritable and just feeling uncomfortable, maybe kind of itchy and just not good. And then, yeah, you don't feel very good, and it really hits you right away. And working out is a good way to deal with it, because then you don't really feel those feelings anymore, and you feel extra energy because you've got this like adrenaline feeling. So yes, steroids make you feel stimulated, and other people can definitely sense it. And also, there is somewhat of a thing to like steroids help create like the essence of a champion, or like the essence of a more masculine man. But they definitely at the same time, they don't make you cool like at all. Okay, they probably make you less cool maybe, because you're like on something and it has mental effects, and then other people are not. So it makes you a little bit less able to like attach or communicate as effectively. You know, similar to like if you were not, definitely this is exaggerated, but you know, perhaps if you were on coffee and the other person was not, you know, or you were on a little bit of alcohol and the other person was not, something like that. I think that it has a bit of a little effect like that, a very small effect on making it a little bit harder to communicate because the body language is a little bit different. But man, humans can pick up on it. There's a ton of shit, man. There's a ton of shit. I mean, your whole life changes when you start taking steroids. Like, believe me, man, your whole life changes when you start taking steroids. I've said this before, like, male hormones are fucking powerful shit. Like, there's a reason why this information is, like, suppressed and, you know, it's hard to find information and shit, because these are powerful freaking drugs, and there's, like, no information about these things that is reliable and that you can find, which is why I wrote Ultimate Guide to ROIDS, my book, and which is why I do the podcast, you know, is because this information it's so hard to find, okay? And it's like, this is powerful shit. So, I don't know, the stuff that, when I'm talking about the mental effects of steroids and everything, and if, you know, how it changes your life and everything, like, it changes the way that, you know, people interact with you for sure, and, you know, like your first impression, it changes, you know, the way you look, it changes the shape of your head and everything. Like, dude, they're really, really, really powerful things, and, you know, change the way that other people feel when they're near you. And they, you know, they also make you think a little bit differently, like ability to focus on one thing, targeting behavior, less multitasking ability. Like they have these effects, and like confidence and like the essence of like someone with like more drive, or like, you know, they say with athletics, the essence of a champion. Like, it helps create those things somewhat. It does. So since it's only male hormones, and basically everyone that gets on male hormones sees how powerful they are, and like how powerful they are and how they can like benefit them, that's basically why like everyone like stays on them. It's like, I would never want to get off steroids. Why would I fucking want to get off steroids? They're like, I'm so much better with them. I'm so much better with steroids. It would fucking suck to have to start using steroids. That would fucking stop. I don't want that. Okay, I want to use them. I like them. I'm dead serious. Like, that's just my opinion. And so, but that's the opinion of most people who have used them. Like just talk to guys who have used them, and they all say like, oh, you know, I want to keep using that shit because oh my God. Anyways, it's just male hormones too, and it has effects that are you know, not with the way that society likes. You know, they don't like, you know, too many masculine men out there. That's not good. So there's a lot of pressure trying to suppress this information, and steroids are relatively new. You know, it's only in the 40s that they started being used, but I'll tell you guys some, you know, early people who used steroids. So Hitler actually took testosterone injections during World War II. He also took meth during World War II, so he was using both of those. President John F. Kennedy took testosterone propionate. A lot of people, guys, a lot of high-up people have used steroids and testosterone. So, steroids. That word, that powerful word that evokes a response in almost every human on planet Earth. If you say that word, steroid, oh, everyone knows. Even the street food, the person who sweeps the streets or sells the fruit on the streets, they know the word steroid, because people are fascinated by steroids. People are absolutely fascinated. Okay, the next question is from Phil, who says, I'm working through listening to all your podcasts so I may as well be in one. What benefits of, if any, using TRI-Tren 150 over the straights on their own? Yeah, so TRI-Tren is 3 different esters of Trenbolone. So remember, an ester, you have a hormone, okay? So Trenbolone is the hormone, and then you have an ester that makes it last longer in the body. So TRI-Tren is 50 milligrams of Trenbolone with 3 different esters on it, and they each release at different speeds into the bloodstream. So that's the same way that sustanon is 4 different esters of testosterone in 1 vial. So this is 3 different esters of Trenbolone in 1 vial. So it's like a sustanon version of Trenbolone. As tren acetate, which comes on really quick, and then it has tren enanthate, which is like testananthate, comes on after a couple weeks, and then or a week with tren, it's a little quicker. And then they also have Trenbolone hexahydrobenzyl carbonate in there, which is the longest ester. That's the kind it used to be a human pharmaceutical product that was made for humans in little ampules called Parabolin in France. That was being made until 1997. They stopped making that. The prescription for Trenbolone, the reason it was prescribed was for severely malnourished people. And that's pretty much the way that they use it in cows now. They use it when the cows are on the train going to the slaughterhouse, and like during that catabolic event for them, the cows are on tren, prevent them from losing their muscle. That's one of the ways that they use it. There's a lot of ways that they use tren and estrogen in cows. There's a lot of hormones in there. So no reason to eat too much organic beef if you take steroids or organic chicken. Next question is from Smitty. Would you recommend PCTing no matter what after your first cycle? Every forum says this is a, in all caps, must. I know I'm going to do many, many cycles and don't want to waste time. Is there some valuable experience I'm missing by not PCTing after my first cycle? Any health risks? Well, if you're going to do that plan that you have where you are going to do many, many cycles and you're anxious for gains, you say you don't want to waste time, the health risks are actually in PCTing a lot. Because if you keep on taking those PCT drugs, those things are not healthy. Neither injectable steroids other than tren, those are usually not very unhealthy, okay? That in general, if you're using, I'm not saying this is like a complete hard rule, okay? But if you exclude tren, most of the injectable steroids, they're not that unhealthy. That like a lot of them you can maintain like perfect blood work on them. 750 milligrams of testosterone per week. Yeah, like a lot of people can maintain up to 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week, perfect blood work on that. So oral steroids are usually toxic though. They usually like always hurt your blood work and make your blood work actually look like a mess while you're on them. And then when you're off, it goes back to normal. And then also stuff like Nolvadex and, aromatase inhibitors, if you're using them, while you're not on cycle, and, for PCT and Clomid, those things, yeah, they mess up your blood work while you're on them. So why would you want to go through this yo-yo anyways of where you're PCTing to get your nuts back, them nuts. And then after you got them nuts back, you leave them nuts hanging out of some, your girl a few times, and then, they go bye-bye again because you start another cycle. What the fuck was the point of that? And then they come, you get done with that cycle and leaving them nuts hanging out again, and then they go bye-bye again after another cycle. Like, that, just do what you want to do. You'll find out pretty soon. You'll find out pretty soon that if you want to get real big, you got to pretty much just stay on. Yeah, you can do cruises. Come off for a month or 2 months. And then you can do some TRT for a little, another month or something. And then do another 4-month cycle or something. And maybe do that twice a year. But for the most part, it's you're gonna be like on testosterone or something for most of the time. If you're like really into bodybuilding or like getting big or something like that, you want to be real big. You know, blasting and cruising, as they call it, or, you know, just like staying on something most of the time, like at least some testosterone. That's the way you got to do it. And a lot of guys that say that they're like completely off, they're lying. Okay. It's not true. And okay. So people who are like really, really into bodybuilding, they're obsessed with bodybuilding. Okay. Usually that coincides with not being like a really social person, like a really socially aware person. If you look at, and also some of the drugs, you know, like Trenbolone and stuff. Like if you look at like pro bodybuilders, they don't seem like normal. Like they have a weird, it's like off, the communication. It's off. It doesn't seem right. It seems weird. And man, why was I even talking about that? You know what? We're going to move to the next question. If I were you, I'm just going to say this now. I would be on testosterone for most of the time. And I wouldn't be doing a lot of PCTs. Keone asks, hey bro, what are the best steroids for a starter like me? Stuff that doesn't give a lot of side effects and is easy to use. And you can just kind of take it and make gains. And then, and also like, you know, get like a performance enhancement effect and like look better while you're on it. Stuff like that. So that would be like a low dosage of testosterone. For a first cycle, I think a lot of times 1 or 2 cc's of testosterone. So 250 or 500 milligrams of testosterone with an oral that doesn't turn into estrogen or any other hormones is a good cycle. So something like Anavar or Winstrol or Turinabol, those 3 oral steroids, they don't turn into any female hormones. And when you're on them, they make you stronger, like really quickly within a week. And they make you look better too, like pretty quick, like within a week. So, and they don't make you like gain weight, so you don't look like bloated and everything. They make you look better. So doing that, and then you have to not worry about any side effects because they're not making any estrogen. You don't have to take any other extra pills with them or something like that. It's an easy cycle. So that's what I recommend for a first cycle, is doing something where you get to satisfy that hunger to be enhanced a little bit. Okay, this next question is from Thorn. He's from the city in California that I went to college in, that I went to university. I went to University of California, Santa Cruz. And so Thorn says, what's up? I'm a 34-year-old aspiring bodybuilder from Santa Cruz, California, and listen to the podcast religiously. What's up, Thorn? What's up, buddy? I am looking for information on insulin and its relation to growth hormone, dosing and protocols, and why these protocols work best, how it works in your body to shuttle nutrients, and how to safely use it without going hypoglycemic. Thanks for everything you're doing. Also, which insulin is best and why? Okay, so insulin question. Yeah, so insulin, it's one of the few chemicals that can actually kill you in one, that's used in bodybuilding in like one dose. So when talking about using insulin, know that you are using something that can kill you. If you use, like you said, getting hypoglycemia, if you use too much without enough carbohydrates. If you get into hypoglycemia, then you can go unconscious into a coma really quickly, and then you can like die. So, you know, for somebody like Dallas McCarver that had food in his mouth and died, it's pretty obvious what was happening. Hypoglycemia from an insulin shot, not having enough carbohydrates, trying frantically to load the mouth with carbohydrates because you're going into shock. And you know, the arms, when you go into shock and you're shutting down like that, the arms become like flappy fish, and the feet and legs too, you can't control them. So if you've ever got out of bed like with your leg asleep and like fallen over, because you know, like you put when you got out of bed or something, this might have happened to you or might not have, everyone. When you get out of bed and the leg's asleep, you can't use the muscle, and so you just fall over, and then you're like on your side on the floor. So this is the same thing that happens with the insulin when you're going into the insulin coma, which can happen really quickly. It can happen within minutes. Your arms and your legs, everything will start to just become like flapping, with no kind of tension at all on it. So if you try to take a step, to get to the fridge or something like that, your leg will just collapse under you, and you'll be trying to move your arm to reach for something, and you're just kind of slapping at it. That's what happens when somebody goes into an insulin coma. So that's why insulin is dangerous, because as a worst case scenario, that's the consequence of using insulin. And then when we're talking about things like steroids or growth hormone, there aren't consequences like that associated with them. So when you're using insulin, just be aware that you are using something that has a much higher absolute, what's the worst thing that can happen. You're using something that is more like that. And you know what? I said all the bad things, that can happen about insulin. Also, at the same time, realize that there are, millions of diabetic people who have to take insulin every day. And they do have lower life expectancies, shorter life expectancies than people who are not diabetic. But most of them are not dying on insulin every day. Most of them are 100% fine. However, there are a number of them who do die every year in statistics from insulin related accidents. So it's really a substance that carries risk with it. It really is. As far as using it, the simplest, so I'll tell you the mechanism behind why people use it. Okay. You can choose your dosages and protocols and everything like that. But I'll show you the reason why it works. So it increases the amount of IGF-1 that goes into your blood level when you use growth hormone with it. If you use growth hormone alone versus when you use growth hormone with insulin, the growth hormone with insulin increases the IGF-1 a lot more than growth hormone alone. And then the other reason why you use it is to shuttle nutrition across the cell membrane into the muscle cell, from the bloodstream into the muscle cell. So pretty much every cell in your body, but definitely muscle cells and fat cells, they have this receptor. They have a membrane. So the organelles, the stuff inside the cell, that make the cell work, the muscle cell, they're inside this like membrane, and that's like a bubble. Like if you blow a bubble, you put all these little ingredients inside the bubble, and those are the organs inside this muscle cell that like make the muscle cell work. And then you got this little bubble blowing around it. Okay, that's the membrane. And so on the membrane, there's all these receptors on it. And like one of the receptor is the male hormone receptor, the androgen receptor. And then there's, another receptor. It's an insulin receptor. And, these little receptors are all scattered all over the cell membrane on all your cells. And when they see their little thing that their stimulator, their activator, come along, they dock with that shit. So an androgen receptor docks with steroids molecules. So when it sees that androgen receptor on that bubble around your muscle cell, it's the membrane. It keeps the rest of the stuff of the muscle cell inside. When that androgen receptor docks with a steroid, a male hormone, DECA, Trenbolone, testosterone, Anavar, any of them, then it transmits a message into the nucleus, the DNA of the cell, and tells it, there's freaking steroids here, man. There's freaking steroids. And we're going to start making some muscle. And we ain't losing any muscle. We're not losing any protein. That's what it signals. That's the result. Okay, so the insulin receptor, there's an insulin receptor on all the cells. On the membrane, once that insulin is in the blood and it docks with that membrane, it doesn't dock with the membrane. It docks with the insulin receptor. It docks with the insulin receptor. The insulin docks with the insulin receptor on the cell membrane. And what that transmits the message is open the floodgates, baby. Send in all the nutrition in the bloodstream, all the nutrients in the bloodstream. Just open that shit up, like open sesame. That's what insulin does. And so that's why people say, and why it can create such a huge difference in a physique size, like overnight and shit, is because you can load these people's freaking muscle cells up with all of the nutrients that are in the bloodstream using anabolic windows and using insulin and growth hormone. So basically what happens is you go and do a workout. And when you go and do a workout, the workout makes your muscles get broken down. It's damaging to the muscles. And so then all of these receptors start appearing on the membranes of those muscle cells that were damaged. And you're using glycogen, carbohydrate fuel storage, from inside of the muscle cell while you're exercising. That's the fuel that it's using to do the exercise. So now at the end of the workout, the muscle cell then becomes extra sensitive to insulin. And the harder you work out, the more sensitive to insulin the muscle cell is. And the way that it does that is it puts out these receptors on the membranes of the cells, of the muscle cells, called GLUT4 receptors. Okay, so that makes carbohydrates, it enhances carbohydrate uptake into the muscle cell to make more muscle glycogen. Okay, and the more intensity you train with, the more of these GLUT4 receptors are created on the outside of your muscle cells that allow the glycogen supercompensation to happen. And then you got other receptors that are appearing out there, like IGF-1 receptors for repairing the muscle. Okay, so now right when you get done with your workout, okay, you take a growth hormone shot. This is why they take the growth hormone to the gym with them. You see like Boston Lloyd in his videos, you see him like taking a cooler of like growth hormone and insulin and shit to the gym with him. And then like as soon as he gets to his car, you see him taking shots already. So he was doing a similar protocol to this, because what you do is right when you get out of the gym, that moment you get done training, and the moment you get done training, you see, my muscle cells are super sensitive to insulin, and they're super sensitive to IGF-1. They've got all these IGF-1 receptors out there, okay? Because, I've just damaged them and depleted their energy storage. So you immediately take a shot of growth hormone intramuscularly so that the growth hormone, goes straight to your bloodstream. And what it does then is it actually desensitizes your fat cells to insulin, because that's what growth hormone does to when the growth hormone molecule interacts with the growth hormone receptor on fat cells. It desensitizes them to the effects of insulin, and then it also at the same time makes the muscle cells more sensitive to insulin even more. Okay, and then it also stimulates those IGF-1 receptors that are on the muscle cells at the same time, because it creates IGF-1 from the liver. Okay, so then after you take that growth hormone shot, then you start eating sugar. Okay, you eat sugar, and you eat like whey protein would be a good one right here, because it gets in the bloodstream fast. And so then the person loads their bloodstream. Okay, they load their bloodstream while they have just done the workout and they've had the growth hormone shot to make the insulin sensitivity in the body very extreme. This opens up like a real anabolic window. Okay, and then they start loading their bloodstream with sugar and fast acting protein. Okay, and so then their blood gets all full of this shit, and And then now, what happens next? I think some of you guys know. Okay, so about after doing that for 15 to 30 minutes or something, loading up the bloodstream by eating a fast-acting protein and sugar. Okay, now what's the next thing that happens? Transport molecule, okay? So transport molecule is insulin. So insulin then is injected, and what the insulin does is it goes to the muscle cell insulin receptor and says, open sesame, open sesame, okay? And now all of the nutritional and energetic contents of the bloodstream are then slammed like a pile driver into the muscle cell, okay? And the muscle cell takes up all of the energy that is in the bloodstream, the anabolic window during that time, and the sensitivity of the insulin and the growth hormone, and having done the workout, being on the steroids, all combines at that moment to make the anabolic window. You know how they talk about the anabolic window? This is a serious freaking anabolic window that you make through this little protocol right here with the insulin and the growth hormone and the workout. And then obviously having taken the steroids too, you know, sometimes at this point too, you know, the person will get out of the workout, and or if they took a pre-workout oral steroid, you know, it'll still be in their bloodstream when they're finished, which would make it, you know, even more extreme of an effect. So anyways, that was a big revelation that I just told you guys about this whole protocol. I know that was missing from the podcast before, but now the information is here. This information about, you know, why do people use insulin? So that concept, what I just now told you, is, you know, if you were going to be someone that wanted to use insulin and in their bodybuilding, because there are a lot of people, I don't recommend it. And you know, in the podcast, I don't want to make people either think that I'm like promoting drug use, because there's definitely risk for it, as I experienced myself with you know, injecting an infected steroid solution into my leg, you know, in Colombia, and almost having my leg have to get cut off, you know. So that, you know, I experienced that there's risk associated with, you know, what we're doing here with taking steroids. I experienced that myself. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm glorifying or promoting the use of this stuff. What I'm doing with the podcast is I'm just telling you what people do, okay? So that the information is out there, and so that it's not something that is just unknown and this big mystery. I'm just telling you what people do. So yeah, that's the about insulin today. He's got another question. I'm going to answer his second question too. You know, traditionally, he says, which insulin is best and why? Traditionally for bodybuilding, it's been the rapid acting insulin that's used in that fashion. And know that, you know, yeah, okay, it's been the fast acting that's been traditionally used. There's all kinds of insulin that is used by bodybuilders. Some use the long acting, some use Lantus insulin. It's all operating on that same general principle, though, of the person, you know, takes growth hormone and steroids, and then, you know, they're trying to like super physiologically load their muscle cells with nutrients from the bloodstream by using that transport molecule insulin to, you know, drive the nutrients from the food that they eat into their muscle cells. That's like the principle of why people use insulin. And it's also like why athletes use it too, because so, you know, your body can only naturally glycogen load so fast. So, you know, an athlete, for somebody like in the Tour de France who was doing like a bicycle riding thing, okay, well, insulin is going to be like incredibly useful to them, because, you know, what if they just did, you know, a 12-hour bike ride, and, you know, they've used all of their glycogen stores now that they used from eating spaghetti, you know, for the last week or something like that. So now what they do is they go take a little growth hormone shot and a little test suspension shot in the little car that drives with them or whatever, you know, while they're while they're supposed to be sleeping at night to get their insulin sensitivity right. And they did the workout, the bike riding, and now they take a little test suspension shot because, they don't want to have any drug tests happen. So they just do a little test suspension shot during the race. And so test suspension is testosterone with no ester, so it's instant acting. And then take the little growth hormone and then start loading up the sugar. They can probably put in like 1,000 grams of sugar or something like that, because for the next day they're going to use that shit again. They just use it during the big bike ride, and then they take that little insulin and bam, those muscle cells are completely glycogen loaded again, like in a way that would be absolutely impossible to just load the muscles with that much glycogen like that over time by eating a bunch and really filling the stomach up or something that night. No, it's going to go everywhere. It's going to go into the fat cells, it's going to go into the muscle cells, whatever. But instead, what they do with the growth hormone, the insulin, and the workout and the Tour de France, which would be the bike riding, and then I'm telling you guys doping secrets right now. I'm telling you doping secrets. Wow. I wasn't expecting this. So I wasn't planning to tell you guys all these high value information today. It just kind of came out. So good question, Thorn. Okay, I'm going to read his last question. I hear guys talking and have read that when taking a hormone with a high androgenic rating like Trenbolone, that having a high dose of test and tren is going to overpower the test and the receptors, and then you'll just have a lot of tests floating around just waiting to aromatize into estrogen. Now, I hear you constantly saying more test equals thicker gains, and I'm a big proponent of this because that's what I'm looking for in my goals. And I looked at his picture, and yeah, he's very thick. He's very muscular. But I also am very sensitive to anti-estrogens and don't want to be abusing a bunch of anti-estrogens to keep my test from turning into estrogen. Okay, yeah. So the thing about overloading the androgen receptors, that's a myth. So what happens is the more shit you take, the more androgen receptors your body produces. So like if you take steroids, you have more androgen receptors than a natural. And then if you take more steroids, you have even more androgen receptors. And as you keep on increasing the dosage, your body keeps making more receptors. And you know what? They've done studies on animals, okay? And this effect keeps on going up to over, okay, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this, okay? But they've done studies on like dogs and shit with like 100,000 milligrams like Anavar and like testosterone like per week on these like fucking animals, okay? So it never stops. It never stops. The more roids you take, the more receptors you produce. There's no limit because of receptors. So that's a myth, and so just debunked the myth for that one. So everybody know that. You take more roids, you make more receptors, and your body handles them. And then you can do other things too, like taking growth hormone, for example, also increases androgen receptors even more. That's why generally the more shit people take, the bigger and more advanced they are, because like everything is synergistic. So it really is like the more shit you take, the more big you get, because it has all these mechanisms that keep building on each other. Like more hormones, more different types of hormones, growth hormones, steroids, more androgen receptors being produced from both chemicals. It's like an explosive chain reaction. And then the other one is he's talking about having more estrogen. And yeah, so Trenbolone is going to make you like more sensitive to estrogen. It has an effect like that, like where like Deca does this too. Deca makes you more sensitive to the effects of female hormones. So when you're getting female hormones from taking high testosterone levels, you get sensitized to it by the Trenbolone or the Deca. So having your prolactin low while you're taking the Deca is going to be the first thing, because if you're like getting gyno or getting estrogen effects, and you're on Trenbolone, if you try to combat them with normal stuff like Nolvadex or Exemestane or Arimidex, it won't work. It like won't do anything. You have to have cabergoline first to get your prolactin low. That's like the prerequisite where then those drugs can start working for gyno issues when you're on tren. Then the Nolvadex and the Arimidex or Exemestane or Letrozole can start working. If guys are worried about like health and reacting bad on aromatase inhibitors, the best one to take is Exemestane or Aromacin. It's the same thing, just two names. And that's because that one, it's a prohormone to testosterone that is like really has a lot of like attraction to the aromatase enzyme. So it's like more attractive than testosterone. It's a prohormone to testosterone that is more attractive to testosterone than that is more attractive to the aromatase enzyme than testosterone is. Wow, that was a tongue twister. So you're taking a natural like steroid hormone when you take Exemestane. I don't think it's quite natural, but it's very similar to the natural hormone, okay? But then when you're taking something like Arimidex or Letrozole, those are not hormones. Those are just synthetic man-made chemicals, and they are not as healthy. And they have, effects that show up in your blood work from taking them. But Exemestane, not so much. A little bit. Cholesterol. Cholesterol is usually what's affected by the antiestrogens. So that's talking about that. For health, Exemestane, best antiestrogen. And for guys that have a lot of aromatization, they create a lot of estrogen from testosterone and high testosterone dosages. Using letrozole as your primary AI is the best way to deal with that.
If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.